The Morton and Reed headquarters always looked most imposing at sunset. 60 stories of glass and steel reaching into the Chicago sky. A monument to corporate success and power. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. I knew better. My name is Sarah Chen, and for the past 18 months, I've been a junior accountant at one of America's most prestigious investment firms. Today, at 28, I was about to risk everything to expose what I discovered hidden in their perfectly balanced books. Miss Chen, Lisa, the CEO's assistant, peered into my cubicle. Mr. Morton wants to see you. I nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. In my bag, a USB drive contained enough evidence to bring down the entire executive board. On my phone, an email was drafted and ready to send to every major shareholder, the SEC, and 3 investigative journalists. The timing had to be perfect. James Morton's office occupied half of the top floor, with views of Lake Michigan that probably cost more than my annual salary. He sat behind his massive desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, looking every bit the distinguished CEO in his tailored suit. "Sarah, come in." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've been reviewing some of your recent work." My heart rate picked up, but I kept my voice steady. "Yes, sir. You've been quite thorough in your auditing of our international accounts, particularly the Singapore transactions." Of course I had. Those transactions had been my first clue that something was very wrong at Morton and Reed. "Just doing my job, sir." He removed his glasses, fixing me with a stare that had probably intimidated countless people over his 30-year career. "Your job, Sarah, is to process the numbers you're given, not to question their origins." I thought accuracy was important in accounting. "Accuracy," he said slowly, "is relative, especially in a firm as complex as ours." There it was, the subtle threat wrapped in corporate doublespeak. I heard rumors about other employees who'd asked too many questions. They tended to disappear from the industry, their reputations mysteriously tarnished. "I understand, sir." "Do you?" He leaned forward. "Because I hate to see a promising career derailed by excessive curiosity." I thought about the evidence I'd gathered, the shell companies in Singapore and the Cayman Islands, the artificially inflated investment returns, the missing pension funds, most importantly, the algorithm I created to track and document it all. "The shareholders' meeting is tomorrow," Morton continued. "I suggest you take some time to reflect on your priorities." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Yes, sir. Thank you for the advice." As I walked back to my cubicle, my phone buzzed. A text from Tom and it. "It's done. Every computer in the building is ready." Good. Phase 1 complete. People often ask why I chose accounting as a career. They expect some boring answer about job security or being good with numbers. The truth? I believe in patterns, in the stories that numbers tell when you know how to read them. My father taught me that. He was a small-town accountant who treated every client's books like they held mysteries waiting to be solved. "Numbers don't lie, Sarah," he'd say. "People lie. Numbers just tell the truth quietly." Dad lost everything in the 2008 financial crisis, his retirement savings wiped out by the very kind of corporate fraud I discovered at Morton and Reed. He died 2 years later, still working at 72 because he couldn't afford to retire. I joined Morton and Reed for a reason. Their reputation for innovative investment strategies had always seemed too good to be true. Dad would have seen it instantly. It took me a year and a half of careful investigation to prove it. That evening, I stayed late, pretending to work on quarter-end reports. Really, I was watching the executive parking lot empty out through my window. One by one, the luxury cars departed. Finally, only a few remained. My phone buzzed again. "Tom, systems check complete. Ready for tomorrow." I smiled, thinking about the months of preparation that had led to this moment. Tom had been essential, a senior engineer who lost his parents' savings to corporate fraud. When I showed him what I'd found, he joined my cause instantly. Together, we'd built something the executives would never expect from a junior accountant with wild accusations. At exactly 8:45 the next morning, I walked into the annual shareholders meeting in the company's main conference center. The room was packed. Board members, major investors, financial press. James Morton stood at the podium, confident in his $10,000 suit. I took my seat in the back, watching the familiar faces file in. Richard Reed, the founder's son, who'd never worked a real day in his life. Sarah Martinez, the CFO who signed off on all those fraudulent reports. Michael Wong, head of international operations, architect of the Singapore scheme. All of them so certain of their untouchability. Morton began his presentation, highlighting another year of exceptional returns and market-leading performance. The shareholders nodded approvingly, dreaming of their dividends. I checked my watch. 9:15, time for phase 2. Standing up, I walked to the central aisle. "Excuse me, Mr. Morton. I have a question about the Singapore accounts." He barely glanced at me. "This isn't the time for detailed accounting queries, Miss Chen. Security, please escort." Specifically, I continued, raising my voice, "I'd like to know why $4.2 billion in pension funds was routed through shell companies you personally own." The room went silent. Morton's face darkened. "This is ridiculous." Security. 2 guards moved toward me. I held up my phone. "Before I'm escorted out, you might want to check your emails. All of you, especially you, Mr. Morton." He reached for his phone just as others in the room did the same. The algorithm Tom and I had created was elegant in its simplicity. At exactly 9:17 a.m., every computer in the Morton and Reed network would receive a detailed report of the firm's fraudulent activities. Every transaction, every shell company, every fake return, documented with perfect precision. The beauty of it, all the evidence came from their own systems, their own numbers. We hadn't hacked anything. We just let the numbers tell their story. Morton's face went from red to white as he read. Sarah Martinez dropped her phone. Michael Wong started frantically typing on his laptop. "This is absurd," Morton sputtered. "She's just a junior accountant." These accusations are supported by 18 months of forensic accounting. I cut in. The SEC has a copy. So do the FBI and 3 major newspapers. Oh, and that system update your IT department installed last week? It prevents anyone from deleting or altering the records. The room erupted in chaos. Shareholders were shouting. Reporters were already calling their editors. The security guards stopped, unsure who they were supposed to be protecting now. Morton gripped the podium, his knuckles white. "You've just ended your career," he hissed. "No one will ever hire you after this." I smiled, thinking of my father. Maybe, but at least I can look in the mirror tomorrow morning. My phone buzzed one last time. "Tom, phase 3? I looked around the room at the unfolding chaos, at the empire of lies crumbling under the weight of truth, and typed back, "Not yet. The best part's still to come." Because what no one in that room knew yet was that exposing the fraud wasn't my endgame. What I'd planned next would change not just Morton and Reed, but the entire industry. The real story was just beginning. Part 2, the bigger truth. The next 48 hours were a blur of federal agents, reporters, and chaos. Morton and Reed's stock price plummeted. Trading was halted. The SEC launched a formal investigation. CNN ran the story in heavy rotation. Junior accountant exposes billion-dollar fraud. But I was already moving on to phase 3. "Are you sure about this?" Tom asked as we sat in my small apartment, surrounded by takeout containers and laptops. "We've already won. Morton and the board are facing criminal charges. You've made your point." I shook my head, pulling up files on my computer. This was never about just Morton and Reed. Dad used to say that catching one criminal doesn't fix a broken system. On my screen was the real fruit of 18 months' work. An AI-driven algorithm that could detect financial fraud patterns across multiple institutions simultaneously. Tom and I had developed it using the Morton and Reed data as a test case. "The patterns are the same everywhere," I explained, showing him the preliminary results from our scan of other major investment firms. "The same types of shell companies, the same transaction structures, the same ways of hiding money. Once you know what to look for." Tom whistled as he studied the data. "This could bring down half of Wall Street." "No," I corrected him. "This could force them to change." My phone buzzed, another call from a journalist. I'd ignored most of them, but this one was different. Maria Santos from the Wall Street Journal. She'd been covering financial fraud for 20 years. "Miss Chen," she said when I answered, "I've been reviewing your evidence against Morton and Reed. But I think there's more to this story, isn't there?" I smiled. She was good. "Have dinner with me tonight." Off the record. I'll show you something that will change how you see the entire industry. The next morning's Wall Street Journal headline read, "Beyond Morton and Reed, a system-wide cancer in investment banking." The article didn't reveal our algorithm, but it laid out the systemic patterns we discovered backed by data from multiple firms. The industry's response was immediate and hostile. Reckless accusations, conspiracy theories, attack on American capitalism. But then something interesting happened. Other whistleblowers started coming forward. A risk manager from Goldman Stanley, an auditor from Chase Morgan, a compliance officer from Lehman Brothers, each with stories that matched our patterns exactly. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Sarah Chen. The voice was elderly but sharp. "This is Elizabeth Warren. I've been reading about your work. How would you feel about testifying before the Senate Banking Committee?" That's when Phase 3 really took off. The committee hearing was televised nationally. I sat at the long table, facing senators and cameras, with Tom beside me as technical expert. Behind me sat dozens of other whistleblowers we'd connected with over the past weeks. "Miss Chen," Senator Warren began, "please explain for the committee how these fraudulent practices work." For the next hour, I laid it out step by step, not just the fraud itself, but the culture that enabled it. The pressure to hit impossible targets, the bonus structures that rewarded deception, the regulatory gaps that made it all possible. "And you've developed a way to detect these patterns?" another senator asked. "Yes," I replied. "An open source algorithm that any regulator or auditor can use. We're calling it Truth Seeker. It's already being tested by forensic accountants worldwide." The industry fought back hard. Lobbying groups claimed our algorithm would stifle innovation. Law firms threatened suits. Anonymous sources suggested I was a Chinese spy. Apparently they'd missed that I was born in Ohio. But they couldn't fight the numbers, and numbers don't lie. A month after the hearing, the first major reform bill was introduced in Congress. The Chen-Warren Act, they called it. It mandated the use of fraud detection algorithms like ours and established an independent oversight board. James Morton and his board were indicted on multiple federal charges. But more importantly, our algorithm identified similar patterns at 12 other major firms. The dominoes were falling. One evening, as I sat in my apartment watching the news coverage, I got another unexpected call. "Miss Chen, this is Howard Stevens, Dean of Harvard Business School. We're developing a new course on ethical finance and corporate accountability. Would you be interested in helping design it?" The changes came faster after that. Major firms started implementing their own versions of our algorithm as a preventive measure. Young analysts began speaking up about questionable practices. The culture was shifting. Then came the letter that made me cry. "Dear Miss Chen, my name is Robert Martinez. 10 years ago, I lost my retirement savings in a scheme very similar to Morton and Reed. I had to sell my house. My wife and I moved in with our kids. Today, thanks to your work, I received a settlement check as part of the industry-wide restitution program. It won't bring back the lost years, but it will let us have our own place again. Thank you for fighting for people like us. Your father would be proud." I framed that letter. It hangs in my office now, not at Morton and Reed, which was reformed and renamed under new management, but at the Chen Institute for Financial Accountability, the nonprofit Tom, and I founded to continue our work. The institute does 3 things. Develops new fraud detection tools, trains regulators and auditors to use them, and provides free legal support to whistleblowers. We're funded by a combination of government grants and, ironically, settlement money from the firms we helped expose. Last week, I spoke at a conference of young accountants. One raised her hand and asked why I'd risked everything to expose Morton and Reed. I told them about my father, about his belief that numbers tell the truth if you listen carefully, about how one person with a spreadsheet and a conscience can change an entire system. "But weren't you afraid?" another student asked. Terrified, I admitted. But here's what I learned. The truth is like compound interest. The longer you wait to deal with it, the more it costs you in the end. The industry is different now. Not perfect. There will always be people trying to beat the system, but better, more transparent, more accountable. Tom leads our tech development team, constantly improving the algorithm. We've expanded into international markets, partnering with regulators worldwide. The patterns are the same everywhere, but so is the solution. Let the numbers speak. Sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing case files, I imagine telling Dad about all this. About how his lessons in small town accounting led to systemic change in global finance. About how his belief in the truth of numbers helped protect millions of other families from experiencing what we did. The Chen-Warren Act passed with bipartisan support. The president signed it into law last month, with me and Tom standing beside Senator Warren in the Oval Office. Dad's picture was in my pocket. Numbers don't lie, he used to say. They just tell the truth quietly. Well, Dad, sometimes the truth needs to be shouted. Sometimes it needs a junior accountant to stand up in a room full of power and say, check the numbers. Sometimes it needs someone to build a better system, one algorithm at a time. James Morton was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The day of his sentencing, he asked to speak with me privately. Why? He wanted to know. You could have blackmailed us, made millions. Why did you choose this path? I showed him the letter from Robert Martinez. Because numbers aren't just figures on a page, I told him. They're people's lives, hopes, futures, and the truth about numbers is that they always tell a human story. He didn't understand. He probably never will. But that's okay, because across the country, young analysts are using our tools to check their firms' transactions. Regulators are catching fraud patterns before they become crises. Whistleblowers are finding their courage. And somewhere, a small-town accountant is teaching their child that numbers don't lie. They just need someone brave enough to tell their truth. The Chen Institute is expanding again. We're opening offices in London, Singapore, and Frankfurt. The patterns of fraud may be universal, but so is the power of truth to correct them. Last month, I received an honorary doctorate from Harvard Business School. In my acceptance speech, I talked about compound interest again. Not of money, but of integrity. How small choices to do the right thing add up over time until they change entire systems. The truth, like compound interest, grows exponentially when you invest in it. Dad taught me that. The world is learning it now, one spreadsheet at a time.